So obviously, for those of you who are present, the recording is so that we can share Shiva's presentation with other participants who could not be here with us today. So it is my pleasure to present you today. I think it's our fourth webinar of the series for the PUPP meeting, and we are very lucky to have Dr. Sivasubramaniam, how's that? Not too bad. Who is at the University of Derby. He's working in forensic sciences, and today he will be talking about considering and applying ethics in every step of your research journey. So, Shiva,
thanks, Martin. For you it's good morning. For me it's good afternoon. So probably the international attendees might have different timelines. So it's safe to say good morning anyway. So you can call me Shiva, as Martin has introduced to me that I'm just trying to give some advice to the mainly the intended audience would be the MSc students, PhD students, research assistant, early career researchers, and if there are any new appointed lecturers, for them as well, thinking about ethics and how to apply in their research and studies, mainly research, every step of the research, because most of the time that, I don't know whether it is universal or not, but in UK, most of the PhD students, or even researchers, they only worry about getting the ethical approval. And once the ethical approval is sorted, then they think that they have done the ethics properly, so they can carry out their research. But in reality, that is not the case. Many of you would have already noticed that, because the research ethic approval is one thing, getting approved is another thing, and then abiding is the most important thing. So that's what we are going to highlight, or try to highlight to you. So many of the students, because it's an international Zoom-based webinar, so we will have different aspects or different questions in your mind. Some of you wanted to know what is the research ethics linked to my personal values. What do I do to value ethics? And others might think about, okay, this is the current understanding is this. My current understanding is this. How am I going to improve research behavior or incorporating ethics in my research? And while others might be worried about what is the need, why should I do this? And others might even think about the challenge, or what kind of evidence I can get to make me apply ethics in every step in my research. So that is the aim. Try to answer all these questions would be the aim of my presentation. So before we go further about ethics, just wanted to clarify something which I always start by clarifying in all my lectures, is there's a huge difference between ethics and morality. But if you see the definition, sometimes the ethics uses morals as a definition, and morals use ethics as definition. So I remove the ethics and moral side of it, and then I try to give a definition that actually links each other, that the ethics is a formal process about shaping the values, principle, and purpose. But morals are the informal framework of the values, principles, and belief. It's mainly enforced by the norms, customs, and the ways of living. So morals from country to country might change a little bit, but ethics are almost neutral everywhere, because it is enforced by law. Most of the time, the law is clear. Sometimes it's not so clear. It's a code of conduct that enforces the ethics in everything we do, not only research, in everything we do. So good example, I always say that I have a moral from my country of origin, where if you see a penny or a dollar on the floor, never pick it up, because that is a cursed dollar. But in the country where I am living now, they say if you see a penny, please take it, because that is a lucky penny. That doesn't mean that my country of origin has got higher morals than my country of residence, but these are morals. These can change from one country to another country. But the ethics, if you are using an animal, there is an expectation to apply ethics in research when you are using an animal. That won't change mostly internationally. So that is the difference between ethics and morality. Let us go to your research projects. So the research project most of the time will start with the research question. And the research question, in order to understand whether the research question is valid or ethically valid, you need to do some literature review. And the literature review, together with your research question, will form the operationalization of how you are going to do research. So I am from a biomedical science background. So most of the time, the operationalization would be in lab-based research. But if you are from psychology or linguistic, then your operationalization might be in a public place, or in a questionnaire-based environment, or online-based. So the operationalization might differ from subject area to subject area, but the process is the same. Some discipline we do lab-based research, others non-lab-based research. And that will lead to the data collection. And the data collection, after the data collection, you will analyze the data. And then the research doesn't end there. You need to report it as well. But as far as the main research project is concerned, these are the steps involved in the research project. So if you ask me, so where does the ethics comes in? My answer is the research ethics and compliance actually governs all these steps. We'll go one by one if I can explain why in each of these steps ethics should be considered in a minute. Before that, whenever we talk about ethics, we always talk about the 18 different pillars of research ethics. I'm not going to go into each and every pillar of the ethical research, because there's no point for you memorizing these 18 different pillars if you are not able to abide by this. But I will only take the important pillars, and then we will discuss that bit later. But try to apply these pillars or these research ethics into every step of the way of your research. That is what the theme is about. So before you start your research, there will be some pre-laboratory brainstorming stages. Probably it might not be called pre-laboratory, but pre-investigative brainstorming stages. This is where you try to link your aims and the objective to the literature survey you had and see whether your research question is valid. So that itself needs some ethical consideration, which we will go into that in a minute. Then it will go to the laboratory investigation stage. Because I'm a biomedical scientist, I call it laboratory investigation stage. But for anyone, it's an investigation stage. When you are doing actual project, that is the stage where you do the investigation. Then that will be followed by data analysis and reporting stage. And then you might wonder, right, laboratory investigation, I would have already thought about the protocols I'm going to use or question I'm going to use. So even in the brainstorming stage, I would have addressed the ethics. yes, you should have started thinking about the investigation stage in the brainstorming stage, and also try to apply the ethics there. However, you need to abide what you have said in the ethical application in the investigation stage and also reporting stage. Then you will write the thesis or report, and then the report, you need to defend the report. So in UK, the defense is normally with one external examiner and one internal examiner. But in Canada and America, it might be different. There would be a presentation to the entire school. But things might change. But the ethics behind the thesis defense depend on how the data was analyzed, how it was reported, which depends on the laboratory investigation or the investigation, and that depends on the research question you are asking. So it's a continuous link from the brainstorming stage up to the dissemination stage. So when you come to the dissemination stage, probably you can present it in a conference, or you can publish in a paper. That itself, there is an ethical conduct of publishing papers as well. So that is what I set a task to myself in today's presentation. I need to highlight the importance of ethics, or importance of applying ethics in every step of the way. So that is what the concept is all about. So in the first slide, I show you about the 18 different pillars. Out of that, if you are accountable of what you are doing, if you are keeping the confidentiality of your research or confidentiality of research participant, and if you can maintain the privacy of your research as well as your research participants, and by maintaining the anonymity, you would have more or less addressed all the 18 different pillars of the research ethics. But that does not only be in the ethical application. So it is all about being honest, applying integrity values, being confidential, fair to other researchers, and fair to yourself as well as the research participant. The research participants might be in the form of human subject, or in some areas, animals as well. And animals has their right as well. So for all these to conduct properly, you need to have the responsibility. You cannot say that, oh, that is my supervisor's responsibility. You got to own the ethics. You need to be the responsible person. This is my research. I have the accountability for the research. So that is the most important thing. So ethics governs everything we do, right? Even before I present this, try to write this presentation, I need to think about the ethical behavior, about whether I have given information properly, whether I have acknowledged the information properly. So you need to, first of all, when you start the research, we need to think about whether this research is really necessary. That is the ethics, considering the benefits versus the harm of the public, because we are doing research, whether it be health research, related research, or psychological research, or even the integrity related research. All of them are, at the end of the day, should enhance the public understanding of, or public stand of, what we have produced as results. So therefore, you got to effectively design the research. And when you think about collaboration, you need to mutually respect your collaboration. But even before you start for the collaboration, you need to think about the integrity and ethical abidance of the collaborator or collaborating organization. So in the past, there are research that has been carried out, funded by, so for example, this is about the effects of smoking to ill health, but it is funded by the cigarette companies. So what is the ethics behind it? How can they conduct, there is a conflict of interest that the cigarette companies are funding the research that is probably being detrimental or being positive about cigarette smoking. So those things need to be thought about. So collaboration means you can't just collaborate. You need to think about the integrity of the collaborating organization as well. And once you have collaborated, you need to think about the mutual respect. How are we going to own the data? How are you going to, if it's a groundbreaking invention, then who is going to own it? How are you going to collaborate it? And you got to truthfully report. That's another thing that we need to think about ethics is you report what you see as data, not what you predicted to be the data. That's the most important things in the research. So you are a research journey. You will come up with the idea. You develop a research question, literature review, develop a protocol. And you might think, okay, I covered the research question, I covered the literature review. So what is ethics do with the developing a protocol? Because again, protocol can be dangerous protocol. How to minimize it? What are the ill effect of that protocol? So for example, if you're doing a question-based studies, whether those questions will emotionally harm the people who are taking part in the study. If you are using a laboratory-based protocol with some chemical, then how that chemical is going to affect me, affect the people who are next to me, or the affected people who are taking part in the study. And what are the precautions I am going to make this? These are all part of the ethics. We might call it in a different way that, or we in UK we call it risk assessment. Why we are doing risk assessment? Because we are ethically sound researchers. Why we are doing cost analysis? Because we are ethically sound researchers. And after all these, you will submit the ethics application. And most of the country institution, they do have an institutional research ethic committee. They actually look through the ethics, and the research committee sometimes contain people outside the institution or neutral people, like some universities, especially in UK, they even use clergymen because they might ask the question, some of the questions that might not be or might be overlooked by the scientists or by the researchers. So they will decide whether this research is ethically sound research, and then you will get the approval. And this is where I wanted to stress, your ethics doesn't stop there. As soon as you get the research approval, do not think, okay, I got the ethical approval, I don't have to do anything else. After that only, you need to abide by your ethical approval. Whatever you said there should be carried out in such a way that has been said there. So that includes laboratory analysis, collecting the data, how are you going to analyze the data, and most importantly, how and how long you are going to save the data. Why that long? You need to think about that as well. Remember, these data might be from some individual who have given some information and the authority to you to handle their data effectively under ethical norms. Then you need to report. When you report, probably you would have heard about in the journals and other stuff. When people publish, there are some authors. They fight with each other. I should be the corresponding author. I should be the leading author. Why? Because the ethics was not applied. And even at the reporting stage or dissemination stage, you need to have a clear understanding of ethics, whether this person has actually contributed to this paper to be included, his name to be included. Or am I excluding somebody who has already contributed just because there are too many authors are there? Those things, thinking that way is more or less ethical behavior. Then you will complete your research. And once you have published, if there is anything that reportable incidents that has happened that might have affected your published data, then you need to report that to the journal that the data is wrong or data is changed, because that is what ethics is about. So ethics is more or less every step you are doing, you need to think about the ethics. You need to be a person who will ethically conduct the research, but also ethically report the incidences that has happened as well. So the role of a researcher, as a summary, is about demonstrating the respect to the yourself, respect to the co-worker, respect to the participant. And you need to gain the competence, but most importantly, you need to behave responsibly with integrity. And the other second more important thing is there are ethical guidelines. Most of them are universal, but some of them are different from different institutions. And sometimes in my particular university, it is different from the discipline to discipline. So you need to follow the guidelines of your discipline, ethical guidelines of your discipline, and make sure the safety and the well-being of the participant and the investigator. Protect the integrity and ethical reputation of yourself and your organization. Don't do it as is an expectation. Make it as a habit. That's what I always tell my students, you own your ethics. When you try to own your ethics, then everything will put into place. Most importantly, you think about whether my research benefits more than the harm is going to bring. So always maximize the benefit and then try to reduce the harm. As a researcher, you need to reflect your own practice. Sometimes the ethical approval says a protocol, but when you start doing the protocol, you might find out, okay, that itself is harmful, although it has been, that doesn't mean, okay, it has already been ethically approved. I don't have to report it. You need to report it back. Because yes, with your clear conscience, you applied for the ethics with a protocol, but that protocol found to be faulty, you report it and readjust it. So that is what developing competence about. You learn from your mistake. Reflection means it's just learn from your mistake. We all are human. We make mistake, but make sure that you correct it on the way. That is part of the ethics anyway. Again, if you are doing research involving human participants, then make sure that they are not being harmed either physically or psychologically or emotionally. Anything that is above they can normally encounter in their ordinary life should be minimized in the research. And you need to understand the risk, any risk, nature of the risk, how it can be protected. Anything you do has got a risk. And in my university, we got an exercise, a funny exercise. We always give the students that we ask them to go to the toilet and then ask them to do a risk assessment about using the toilet. And then many students, after that, they understand, oh, what is the risk and how I can minimize it. Try to mitigate the risk. Again, these are all, you might think that that is risk assessment. This is cost assessment. No, these are part and parcel of being ethically sound person or say ethically sound researcher. Right, let's move to right now. This is where I need to be a bit careful because it's an international audience with a different discipline. My discipline is a medical area, so we don't do anything covertly. But in psychological research, there is a covert element. Not always. You can do psychological research, covert research. You can deceive. You can tell somebody something and then do an entire completely different research because there is a merit behind it. I'll give you an example in a minute. So in the psychological research, if you are carrying out psychological research, you will be bit, you might think that it might, you might think that this is the opportunity for research. Yes, but you need to be careful because you are going to affect the participant psychologically. So an example I can give you is that this has actually happened in UK. There was a study. The participant was called. They were told that they are only going to. They have given an informed consent. I'll come to that, the informed consent, in a minute. Any research involving human being need to have an informed consent. You need to explain the research properly and then give them the authority to decide whether to take part or not. In this particular study, what they have did is they have told the participant, this is a study. We are going to check the blood pressure, right? So the participant volunteers, and then they came with blood pressure. And when they came, the participants were allowed to sit in a room in a downstairs reception, and that reception is filled with health pamphlets. How you can improve your health by everyday exercising, just walking to the work, or instead of taking a lift, taking a stairs, so on and so forth. And then after about half an hour or 45 minutes, each of the volunteers were called one by one at the third floor. And then they went to the third floor, had the blood pressure, and then they gone. But what they actually did is a covert research. The informed consent was not fully given to the participant. What they did was they wanted to understand the effect of the participants reading the health related pamphlets about changing the lifestyle, how it is going to improve their health. And because they are going to be there for half an hour, just sitting there doing nothing, no TV. There are some pamphlets, they just start to read it. Then they go to third floor for the blood pressure checking. The the observation is whether they are taking the lift or they are taking the stairs. So the influence of reading. So this is called covert research. So this is actually in a medical research is taboo. You can't do it. You can't what you call give wrong information. But in psychological term, it is possible, provided it is for the good for the people, good for the public, and provided, number two, most importantly, after the project is finished or after their blood pressure has been taken, they were taken out and then explain the full story about what they have been done. So as soon as you have done that, then that is fine. But normally in the medical research, we don't do this kind of experiment. We are not allowed to do that. But in psychology related, because we are studying the psychological impact about reading the health leaflet, how they are going to improve the lifestyle, it is possible. And because it is health-wise improvement, there is some benefits. So they have measured the benefits versus harm. Benefits was higher, but still you need at one time point, you need to tell the participant, look, this is what we really did, and then why we did that, and what are the good things and the bad things. So these are the reason I covered this a little bit in bit extensive style, because there is a group of people who are doing psychological research. and we do not know. Most of the time when we give ethics, we always say, oh, informed consent should be clear. Yes, but there are psychological researchers, so that I wanted them to understand this as well. If you are using the animals, like, we use animal in our research, again, everywhere is simple that there is a rule. Again, this is another law enforced ethics requirement, is we call it 3 R's of animal research. Wherever possible, you try to reduce the number of animals or the number of species as much as you can to minimize the use of animals, and try to refine your experiment to such a way that the animals will be minimally stressed. And the third one is, wherever possible or whenever possible, you replace the animal with other means of research. So those of you who are doing animal research, first, you need to think about whether it is really necessary. That is the ethical question. Whether it is really necessary, how can I reduce the number of animal I am going to use in this research? Then you say, is there any other alternative? Can I use cell culture? Can I use computer modeling? Right? So these are the things, again, we say it animal research, we say it human research, but these are all you behaving as an ethically sound person. So if you think ethically about yourself, the participants, and the animals, then all these will be covered as well. And applying ethical approval is more or less proactive thinking. It's just like a chess, recognizing the future moves, what will happen, what if, why not that way, always expecting the unexpected, and then don't think that, or avoiding thinking about, okay, ethical approval is obtained, right, my job is done, I can do whatever we want. So I'm going to, the rest of the half an hour, I'm going to spend some time about each stages I explained in my first slide. So there's an ethical approval stage, investigation stage, data analysis stage, and then the reporting and the dissemination stage. So I have minimized the stages into 4 or 5 because of the time. So when you are applying for research, think about the research objective. Is it really necessary? Think about collaborative partners. Are they their integrity is sound? Will they abide by the ethical consideration I am going to do? Just because they are popular or they are internationally known, don't just use collaborators for that. On the other hand, many of the affordable countries, they use some kind of research in the developing countries, because in their countries they can't do it. That is not ethical. That is itself is unethical. When you are using human subject, think that they are humans. They got psychological mindset, and they got a healthy body. How can your research going to intervene all these? If there are researchers that intervene, if it is intervene, how you can minimize it, or what is the justification for intervening their health? And think about the vulnerable individuals. Vulnerable individual doesn't always mean the children. Sometimes the adult, there might be, because of the mental stage, there might be vulnerable. How are you going to use it? Are they really necessary? Again, ask the question, is it really necessary? If you are using animal, choice of animal, right? I mean, in UK, we are not allowed to use any larger mammals. Why? Because that is more or less considered as cruelty. Don't just think about, oh, these are all animal right people, I can do my whatever research I want. No, these animals are more or less next to human. They have got some mindset. Maybe they are lower than the animal, the human being, but they need to be protected as well. Think about your methods. How are you going to carry out the methods? Are they ethically sound methods? Are we using anything that might harm the participant? Data collection. Again, how you are going to collect it. If you are doing a face-to-face interview, you need to think about, okay, how am I going to protect this identity of this person? If you are doing questionnaire, sometimes you might need, we call it pseudonymization. You instead of anonymizing the data, you might have to give some number. That is, those things are actually part of ethics, and this is what most of the scientists, they fail to realize, that ethics is something different from thinking about the harm, thinking about the data breaches, thinking about the data collection. All of them are controlled by ethics. Data storage, how long you are going to store it. All these things need to be taught even before the ethical approval stage. Then only you know what might go wrong when you actually start the process of investigation. Thinking about publication, thinking about dissemination. And again, research doesn't stop after one research. It's always continues. How are you going to continue it? Think about that. So you need to proactively think about your future move and then try to apply the ethics. Again, when you do the ethics, you need to do a risk assessment, whether it's a human being or you alone are going to do the research. Whether you are at risk, any physical risk or psychological or emotional harm. That is true for the volunteers, true for you, true for your co-researchers. COSH means control of substance hazardous to health. Those of you who are doing medical research or chemistry-related research, you are expected to see the chemical, whether it is harmful for the subject or animals or the environment. Because after usage, you are going to throw it in the bin. The bin is going to go into the environment. You need to think about that as well. You might think, oh, that is chemical. That doesn't have anything to do with ethics. No, that is thinking, carrying out research ethically. So doing a course and then making a valid, informed consent. You need to be explicit about what you are going to do. I mean, we at PUPP, we are doing some research, and I know the amount of time Martin focused on writing the informed consent. How many times we went through again and again, because you are actually using somebody else or somebody else's information. Therefore, you need to think ethically as well. So the ethical approval, if you think carefully, it will be simple and straightforward. You need to have a background for the proposal. You need to clearly explain about the nature of the data, how it's going to be collected, what are the procedures, and what are the equipment you are using, and how it is going to risk the participant or yourself. Who are the participants? Some studies, they don't have any participants. Others, they do. Animals or human beings. Then, if it is animal, you think about 3 R's. What are the methods? What are the methods you are going to do? Whether that will have an effect. If the methods has got risk, how it is assessed, whether there is any control of substance hazardous to health problem, how the data is collected and stored, and how long. So now you applied for the ethical approval, you got the ethical approval, you are happy. But then you found out you need to change the protocol. If there's any changes in the original proposal, if it is minor, you need to inform the ethical approval committee that there's a minor change and that minor modification should be amended, and then the ethical approval should be revoked or should be sometime if the intervention or the change is so big, you might have to stop the research and you need to reapply for the ethical approval again. Remember, this has actually happened to me once, because we found out the protocol that was used or in the ethical approval form was not working. We need to change the protocol, but the protocol has got major changes. Therefore, we stopped the research for, actually, because it's a medical research, we stopped it for 1 year until we reapplied and obtained the research ethical approval. And completion of project, if the project has completed, then you need to inform the research committee that we have completed the project, so that they can update the information. If there are any adverse event, even a breakage or somebody is slightly affected, then that need to be notified. Remember, don't think that we got the ethical approval, everything is fine, we don't have to report it. Every single thing, safety protection clearance should be needed if you are using some high electricity or harmful equipments. And if you are adding or removing new researchers, that should be notified as well. So these are, after the ethical approval, general principle. But when you do the laboratory stage, you need to plan the stage properly. Read the subject area, methods and methodology. What are the flows in it? We would have prepared for the ethical approval. One other thing is power calculation is important, and what kind of research relationship you are going to have, and health and safety, which we already covered anyway. Now, you are at the laboratory stage, you need to learn, but learn in a right way, in an ethical way. Do not avoid shortcuts. Don't we always ask questions. Challenge your laboratory guide why it is that. If you can't understand, or if you feel that there might be some ethical problem with carrying out the protocol, you need to be clarifying that, because remember, you are responsible for your own research ethics. Always repeat the data collection properly and look for outliers. Outliers mean, if all the data in one place and 1 or 2 data are the other side, but it is repeatedly coming, that itself is telling you something. We need to think about that as well. Many researchers in all over the world, they are doing it, trying not to manipulate the data. As I told you at the beginning, you report what you see, not what you think that should be, right? And try avoiding selective usage of data just because it is become statistically significant. And think about your own research integrity, because remember, as a researcher, you are professional. So you need to be showing the professional relationship as well. Then the reporting stage, okay, as I told you before, report what you see, avoid plagiarism. Recycling. Recycling means the same results have been published in several different papers without any additional data. That is called salami slicing as well. And be truthful. Try not to manipulate things, and try not to be selective or steal from somebody else's. And always accept the flaws and address the issues that are highlighted by the reviewers. The reviewers, you should consider the reviewers as your critical friends. They are there to critically point out, oh, this might be gone wrong. Again, that might be more or less sound for ethically carrying out the research as well. Before I finish, I just wanted to touch a little bit about the publication ethics as well, and also the authorship, because there are so many news are coming now regarding the authorship. And this is what I recommend. Again, it's up to you. This is called Tenzing Data Management Sheet for authorship. Some of the medical journals are already using it. and the website address is given there in the below. And this is how the website would look like. On your right, on your left, sorry, on your right, ask your collaborators to fill this score sheet, how much they have contributed for each step of your research. Conceptualizing, were they involved in that the conceptualization, refining the data, research idea, literature searches? So what are the inputs? So if everything has got a tick, then he can be an authorship. He can get the authorship as well. So this is how, I suggest researchers to think about authorship. Just because he gave you an antibody or he gave you an important data, that doesn't deserve authorship. Probably acknowledgement, not authorship. These are actually part and parcel of behaving a ethical researcher. And again, this is what, I think I have given you the information, and some of the journals are actually already using it. So it's explanation of which is which, and if you need data, you can, I think this presentation is being recorded, so you can learn from that as well. And then there is a website as well. If you put the information, it will calculate and then tell you whether he or she deserve the authorship as well. So these are the points that you need to think. Again, just for summary, ethics underpins everything we do, especially in research. And the proactive thinking is essential to identify the ethical issues and address it. And one other thing I almost missed, luckily I remember, is the situational ethical decision making. That should be part and parcel of your research, because at one time point in your research career, you will experience an issue, an ethical problem. You need to handle then and there. You cannot wait for the supervisor. In that kind of situation, you need to assess what is the problem and then try to understand what are the different ways you can address that problem. Discuss with your collaborators or the people who are working around you. So if you are a PhD student, your postdoc and everyone, you have a chat with what is the best out of everything, every possible alternative that should be applied to mitigate the problem. So if you are working with a subject with a new drug, and all say you would have done about 1,000 subjects, nobody had any side effect. One person had got the side effect. Then you need to handle that straight away. Yes, you need to report back, but before that, you need to handle that as well. So situational ethical decision making is part and parcel of your research as well. That needs training, that needs reflection, but you need to do that as well. And also the ethical approval process differs from institution to institution, countries to countries, and there are some institution or some countries there is no ethical approval at all, and some other countries there are ethical approval only for medical research. Those kind of things, that doesn't mean that you can carry out research without ethics. You as a person, you need to think about what are the ethics and then try to write a protocol, get advice from people like PUPP, ourselves, and then we can try to direct you in such a way that how to behave ethically in research. Yeah, if possible, follow the institutional guideline and also follow the underlying ethical principle. Again, that's the reason in the beginning of my presentation, I did show that 18 different pillars, but memorizing all those 18 pillars doesn't mean anything if you are not abiding by it as well. So these are some of my what do you call information. I got it. I'm just acknowledging that. If you want, I can send this to you as well. You can contact me. So the writing on the wall is, you are responsible, personally responsible for becoming more ethical than the society you grew up in. So as a researcher, as a person, as a human being, follow the ethics and own the ethics. Do not just follow, you own the ethics. You are doing research ethically because you wanted to, rather than there is a law. With that, I will stop. I will stop sharing, and then if you have any questions, you can ask. Hold on. I'll stop sharing the screen.
No, sharing is gone. Thank you very much, Shiva. We have about 7 minutes for questions. Does anybody have questions? I took notes, so I have a few, but I'll let anybody else wants to go first. Go ahead, Salim.
Hi everyone, thank you, Shiva.
Hi, Salim.
It's nice to hear all this from you. Indeed, I'd like to ask for your opinion relating to an issue we recently experienced with one of my PhD students. Your presentation mainly address medical sciences, but since you are leading the working group under INAI related working group, I believe you have some responses to this. In our discipline, mainly we collect our data by the administration of questionnaire scales to the other participants, and some of the ethical boards in Turkey, they are asking for approval from the people who developed the original scale. Suppose, for example, I develop a scale relating to strategies students are using to avoid plagiarism, and Martina is planning to use my scale to apply for the students. And Martina applies to get ethical approval, and the ethical approval asks them, you need to have confirmation from Salim that he approves that you can use this. To my understanding, it doesn't make sense. I mean, if I publish it in an appendix, for example, openly available for the other people, it means that I already give permission to the other people, to the other researchers, to use this scale, to use this questionnaire, so that they can collect data by using it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think you asked a question that which I almost forgotten to cover it. But the problem here is that, I mean, what your ethical approval committee is asking is right, because it's the original developer should give written permission, unless otherwise that the CC by, you know, if explicitly says that it can be used without or just acknowledging me. If it is not says, even if it is published, then there is an expectation, even in the medical research. I mean, we do some questionnaire research as well. We need to get, especially the scales. So recently we did a quality study about the pre and post laboratory experience by the students, which was published by an Australian author. The scales is widely used, but because his publication doesn't give the authority for us to use, we send an email and he immediately said, yes, you can use it. So that is again the ethical side of the being a publisher. Most of the time, I mean, I encountered these kind of issues in the past. Most of the time, when I contacted them, they just say, the worst comes, they will say, just put me in the acknowledgement, saying that we use this, that would be fine. So in a way, I think to be on the safe side is always better, whether it is published or not, or even openly available or not, to get the permission from the original author. And also it has got the other problem is, It depends on the journal article constraint, whether it is open access or not as well. But it's always better to get the author's approval to use the methods.
Thank you, Shiva, but indeed, it doesn't make sense to me. Suppose, for example, it may become a barrier in front of science. Let's say, for example, I die and Martin wants to use my scale. In this case, to my knowledge, there is no correspondence allowing this.
Yeah, it is very true as well. Very true. I mean, this has happened in the commercial side of as well. You know, I think there is some kind of, you know, similar to KFC chicken. They got a recipe, and the person who knows about the recipe, he died, and the entire what do you call that chain of things, they collapsed because so yeah, that is a risk. But in sorry, Martin, before I let you in, but in an academic side of it, most of us are professional. So being professional is getting that, you know, letting others to use your data. That is being professional as well. That is being ethical as well. Sorry, Martin, if you want to.
But I was going to add to that. More and more nowadays, for example, the PUPP is financed by the Canadian government. And one of the things that we have to do is make available the instruments and the data once it's completely anonymized, everything. But it is now more and more, we will have a responsibility to make the data available to the public. And so even if, luckily, this will not happen anytime soon, even if someone was to pass away, things don't collapse afterwards. Funding agencies more and more in Canada anyways are demanding for so that people can use the data, but also for to be able to replicate, to be able to verify, was the data well reported, was the data well analyzed. People are asked now to show, and it's part of ethics to show that you did do proper ethics. I had a question for you, Shiva.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think it's very interesting, and I had actually many questions, but do you think there are different levels of ethics? And I'm being a little bit of a devil's advocate here. Different levels of ethics. If you're a graduate student, or if you're a beginning researcher, or a full-time researcher, a more, not full-time, but a more advanced researcher.
My answer is, although my answer, I mean, internally it got into trouble, but my truthful answer is that the ethics should be universal. There shouldn't be difference. You know, you are junior, you need to abide everything of every single step. But I am a senior, so I can miss. No, it should be. But in practice, that is what we are doing all these, Martin. In practice, it's happening. Yes.
Sorry, I had another question for you. When you mentioned covert observation measures, or whereas deceit is not allowed, but in the medical field, what about placebos? This is done constantly, and isn't it? If you're a participant in a research, and we hear about these all the time, you have cancer and you're asked to participate, isn't it to the detriment of the participant who doesn't get the potential cure?
Yeah, this is two things are here. One is that there's always, in medical research, there's always a debrief. So the debrief, they would have already been told that they are in the group of placebo. So they know. But the main issue here is, if you are doing an investigative clinical study, the UK research organization or ethical committee, we call it NREC, National Research Ethics Committee, they expect us to be clear that to the participant that this is the investigative study, therefore they cannot expect cure from this study.
Okay, I have one last question for you. The 18 pillars of research ethics. This is perfect, and it exemplifies exactly what ethics should be.
Yeah.
Where is this from? Who did you do this?
The drawing I did it, but I got it from, I think, is WHO or somewhere. I have a feeling I put the reference, but if you not, I can send it to you.
It's probably in the back, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So yes, I'd love to have that, because
Yeah.
I think my graduate students should all benefit from this.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I would love to say, and I think it's very, very important to say, Shiva, this was very interesting. I think you should export your talk to all graduate studies students, because they certainly need that.
And that's the reason I'm coming to Chicago as well.
Yes, yes. But it's also because they need to understand why ethics is so demanding, why obviously it's so important.
Yeah.
So thank you very, very much. And we will
Thank
certainly encourage people to go see it on the see the webinar, the recording on the PUPP website. Thank you again.
Thanks for inviting. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Shiva.